all. Welcome to another Utility Advisory Committee. We'll get things started. We have a little bit of a shorter meeting today, so we'll get right to it. So confirmation of posting, Josh? Okay, thank you. And everybody is here except for Howard Annell is not here today. So we have 6 out of the 7. So if we can get, I guess we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, I guess we'll go to the first comment period, which is related only to the agenda items. So there's nobody out there. Josh, did anybody send any comments in? Okay. And so I guess we'll go to the phone. If there's any comments, if you could call 702-589-9629. Okay, again, that number is 702-589-9629. Okay, not hearing anything, and we have the second comment period. If I did it too fast, we'll go ahead and go to agenda item, well, let's talk about the agenda really quick. So even though 3 hours is a long time, we only have 3 hours today, and we have quite a bit to go over. So what I suggest is that we try to complete the IRP, make sure we get all the comments related to the IRP done, and I will try to fast track my presentation, and then we will go, hopefully have enough time, but we'll probably have to reduce the amount of time on the RFP, and then we can discuss in agenda item number 7 about bringing it back in January possibly, both of the issues. Joe, is there anything that you would like to have the agenda rearranged for any reason?
Yeah, if we could remove item number 3, and then I'll bring that back to the committee at the next meeting, would appreciate it.
Does anybody have any concerns related to that? Okay, so we will remove item number 3. Anything else, Joe?
Nope, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, so then we will go to item number 1 for possible action, approval of the November 2nd, 2022 Utility Advisory Committee meeting minutes. Does anybody have any comments?
No. Since I wasn't here.
I didn't have any comments.
I just noticed that on page 3, 4th paragraph up from the bottom, chairman is spelled wrong.
Is there anything else, Eileen? Okay, thank you. So I make a motion to approve the minutes for November 2nd with the change of the respelling of the chairman. Any second?
I'll second that.
Any comments, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. So that passes unanimously. Okay, so then we will go to number 2. Okay, I thought that was for action. I misunderstood that. Discussion of the updated draft integrated resolution plan, resource plan. Thank you. It's going to be a long day.
Okay. All right. Cue up the presentation here. See if I can get this working. Seem to be having an issue here. Hold on, just stand by. Okay. We'll go ahead and get started here. Good afternoon, members of the committee and members of the general public. I'm pleased to present to you this draft integrated resources plan presentation on behalf of the Utilities Department. I'd like to thank our utilities analyst, Josh Hardy, for all his work in gathering data and preparing this presentation, and Chairman Carr for his peer reviewing efforts. Our city staff and members of this committee are dedicated to ensuring safe and reliable delivery of energy to our community in an environmentally safe and economically sound manner, and I greatly appreciate everyone's efforts. Okay, got it. Okay, I'm Joe Stubitz. I'm your Utilities Director, and this presentation is the 2023 through 2027 Integrated Resources Plan. Wonder if you can help me. Okay, here we go. So, what is the Integrated Resource Plan and why do we need one? So, integrated resource planning is a process for a new energy resource. We evaluate a full range of alternatives focusing on supply-side resources, which is generation and power purchase agreements, as well as demand-side resources, energy efficiency, other programs like solar net metering that reduce the need to acquire supply-side resources. This requirement is something that we have to do as a recipient of federal hydropower. So the city must comply with the requirements of the Energy Planning and Management Program Law, which includes public participation in the IRP process. Okay, utility overview. So as many of you know, Boulder City is unique. The electric division serves 35 of the 207 square miles of the incorporated area of Boulder City, and the electric utility is subject to the jurisdiction of the Boulder City Council rather than the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada. Also, the electric utility does not own or operate any generation resources.
Joe?
Yes, sir.
I like seeing that on your second and third display of the map. The fact that you said acquired by NV Energy, I think that's good to point out because a lot of people may not realize that the area outside of the original 35 square miles, whatever it is not served by Boulder City. I think it's good that you pointed that out on that map.
You could stay there, Joe, if you'd like. I just lost my computer.
Oh, it's in your hand.
That's just good. I'm glad somebody else said that.
You could go back to the previous slide and it would show you on the display there.
What made you? No, it's okay. I just had all my notes. Okay. So here's a snapshot of load profile from fiscal year 21. And you can see the first day of the fiscal year is July 1st. So you can notice that spike, and really the difference between the daily max and the daily min, you have your largest separation in the summer months, so the peak demand. So the months of June, July, August, and September, we're going out and getting market energy resources. And our peak demand is about 3 times the average for residential and 2 times the average for commercial. Here's a pie chart, 2 pie charts of our accounts by category. So most of our accounts are residential at 87%, followed by commercial 11%, and then 2% with city. And as far as the energy usage goes for the number of those accounts, about 2/3 of our energy usage is from residential customers, and about 1/3 is from commercial, and the remainder is city. It's one of my favorite slides. So this is a comparison of power costs for a typical 1,500 square foot residence, and this shows the average monthly cost of electric service. One thing to note here, the blue graphs, the blue bar graphs are the not-for-profit utilities, and the red bar graph is the investor-owned utility. So from this information, you could see on average we're 21% lower than our next highest average costing neighbor at Mesquite, and 43% on average lower than the investor-owned utility. Here's a breakdown of our current customers by rate class. You can see most of our residential customers, we have over 7,000 accounts, as well as the associated service charges for those accounts. And this breaks down a little bit more detail than just the residential, commercial, and city. This slide indicates our low-income energy assistance. So even though that we only account for 5% or just about 6% of energy sales for Nevada, we provided 95% of the low-income energy assistance provided by those utilities.
Can you say that again? I'm not quite sure I understand what you're meant.
Sure. So in fiscal year 21, the city of Boulder City accounted for just about 6% of the energy sales for Nevada's nonprofit utilities, but we provided 95% of the low-income energy assistance. This slide shows our existing supply-side resources. So for the power purchase agreements, we've got Hoover, which was recently renegotiated in 2017. That's a 50-year agreement. And then the Salt Lake City Area Integrated Projects, which is Glen Canyon and various other hydroelectric facilities, as well as the newest addition, Townsite Solar, which went into online January 1 of this year and is a 30-year agreement.
A question on that, Joe.
Yeah.
On the Townsite Solar, are we buying that at 100%, or is it just follow our, do we just buy what we need when we need it, or?
We buy that 100% firm, yeah. So we
Okay.
have 5 megawatts throughout much of the year, except for March and April, and then off-peak in November.
Okay, thanks, interesting.
On that slide too, Joe, just so for this report, it's not, Western fully is aware of it, but I think just remind the public and the committee is that capacity for hydro is contingent. And so we won't be able to get 20 megawatts for a long, long time.
That's correct.
It's just what is the capacity that's currently available at the plant is what Boulder City gets a percentage of.
That's right.
What's that percentage?
I don't have percentage off my top of my head, but several years ago, we were only getting like about 15, 14 megawatts because we were down so far. And so it's drastically lower than that now for the Schedule A. So 20 compared to like 15 or 14.
Yeah, and in the following slides, we'll go into a little bit more detail of the
Yeah.
breakdown of energy consumption from source, so you'll get to see the amount of Hoover A energy over a period of time. This slide is a flow chart of our wholesale power activities. So everything besides Hoover B and the SLIP contracts go through directly to the Silver State Energy Association, of which we're a member. So the Hoover B contract and the Salt Lake City Area Integrated Projects go through the Colorado River Commission. And then our short-term and balancing authority services are provided by Western Area Power Administration. This slide shows our energy purchases for calendar year 2017 through 2021. And you could see that for the slides here, although I had the percentages in my notes, I'll try and kind of come up with it off the top of my head, that maybe 44% market purchases in this range. You got Hoover A, Hoover B, and then the Salt Lake City Area Integrated Project. So we had about a range of 55 to 58% hydro, and then the rest is covered by market purchases. This slide shows our forecasted net contracted megawatt hours purchased and sold for 2023 on the open market. And you could see the largest demand is for energy is in June, July, August, and September. This next slide shows our existing demand side resources. For that, we've got our tiered rates, our energy efficiency rebates, and our solar net metering. From the data we've got shown here, we've got basically 3 times the amount of residential customers from 2021 since 2017. And we're averaging, in the last 3 years, over 1,000 megawatt hours saved.
Joan?
Yes, ma'am.
Going back to the slide before on the forecasted SSEA net purchased and sold, and then the one before that, that doesn't take into consideration the 5 megawatts that we're now getting from Townsite Solar, right?
So the one before does not, because it's from 2017 to 2021. This particular slide with the 2023 forecasted does take into account the 5 megawatts included with Townsite.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Here we've got our tiered rates as they apply to residential series and general series and other classes. For the residential series, we've got 3 tiers, and you could see that over 91% of the residential series are in that first tier. Some of the other nonprofit utilities have an additional tier where it's to the first 500 kilowatt hours. That could be something that the committee could explore in the future. This particular slide shows a year's usage for a 1,500 square foot house, and you could see that you're in the summer months, you're getting into the second tier. But from this, you can get a picture of from an average house, if at some point we wanted to redistribute the first tier to have a smaller amount of kilowatt hours, what that would look like if a 1,500 square foot house would stay in the first tier.
Yeah, I guess that's a good slide, because the first, 1,000 would be, you could see 1,000 being reasonable, because most people could get under that in some of the months, but this slide shows that as an average, 1,500, nobody goes under 500. And so
Right.
You'd have to do some major efficiencies to really do that. So it seems like that might be a big ask.
Yeah, I might consider 1,000
Yeah.
as more of a appropriate.
But that slide's a good indication, so it gives you sort of an idea of what's going on. Thank you.
This particular slide shows our energy efficiency rebates that we've distributed from calendar years 2017 to 2021. You could see that it's gone down slightly, but we're hoping to pick it back up. We've got new energy rebates bring into council under the committee's advisement to the January meeting, and that's expanding the amount of rebates to the higher seared AC units, as well as the smart thermostats, and the expanding beyond just electric to the water smart controllers. So trends affecting our resource needs. This shows a calendar year from 2013 to 2022 with the population. As we kind of discussed before the meeting, we'll look at updating the population to match 2020 census data. But important note is the peak demand and the change in peak demand, as well as energy consumed. We're right under 1%.
So in that, is that number going to be able to be updated in January for 2022, or should that be like an asterisk with an estimate, since we haven't finished this is calendar year, we haven't finished the year to have the number as an absolute?
I think the entire column says estimate, so it's just for trending purposes. It shows the estimate of the
I thought these were
population.
actuals. These are actuals. This isn't estimated. This is historical.
So we'll use an estimated one then for year 2022.
Okay, just thanks.
Yeah.
You're saying that we only used, that was quite a decrease in 2017, 2018, 144 million. So we actually used that much less from the year before in 2020.
Yeah.
I don't know what would cause that. Maybe it's COVID or who knows what.
Right, exactly.
That's quite a decrease.
Yeah, and then 22, we had this large fall heat wave. September, October, and even
could have done
into
that too,
November,
so.
that 164 sort of makes sense.
Interesting dip.
I guess that's something to go further into for later, so is that the energy is really hard to estimate.
Sure. So now our load forecast assumptions. So we currently have 0 approved subdivisions for the 2023 to 2027, and kind of shows you some low, mid-range to high growth scenarios. And we're assuming that commercial load growth will match residential load growth, and that the existing trend of conservation and efficiency improvements at 1.2% per year will continue over the forecast period. So with that, the load forecast for the city, the energy consumption is expected to grow between 0% to stay flat, or grow modestly at 1% per year over the next 5 years. And barring any unforeseen large load, energy consumption in the city will be less in calendar year 2023 than it was in calendar year 2021.
And that's primarily because we don't have any large subdivisions that are approved to move forward. So we're not going to see any builder building very many houses, doesn't look like, huh?
Based on the growth numbers, yes.
Right, okay. Interesting.
Then we get into our future supply side resources. So this is forecasting the power purchase agreements as well as the market purchases. So you could see federal hydropower still remains a top priority, majority of our energy demands, and town site solar staying flat. And you could see our market purchases from fiscal year 2022 compared to 2017 are much less. So our market purchases are in the 20% range. So we've nearly halved the amount of market purchases that we need to go out and get with the addition of the town site solar power purchase agreement. Environmental considerations. We currently do not have any evaluations to be done for the 5-year period for supply side resources. And then as far as existing and planned demand side resources, the city recently added 5 electric vehicles to their fleet, 4 different Teslas and 1 Mach-E. And in 2023, it's estimated that these vehicles will provide over 8,500 gallons of fuel savings to the city. For future demand side resources, the city plans to retire 2 substations by 2026. This project required replacing 330 pole top transformers with the dual voltage units. Most of these transformers were manufactured in the 30 and 1970 range, and they're significantly less efficient than the replacement transformers. System losses will be reduced by over 1,000 megawatt hours per year once all the replacements are done. And we've got I would say all the transformers done, 95% of the poles that are needed to be completed for the project. Then we get into our action plan. So the action plan for the integrated resource plan is to continue full funding of the energy efficient appliance program through calendar year 2023 and subject to the direction of the city council in years thereafter. Also, we plan to continue to measure the effectiveness of our demand side programs, reporting expenditures and estimated peak demand and energy savings on an annual basis. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Does anybody have any questions on the presentation?
I would just like to comment that when I was here almost 14 years ago, our peak demand was about 5 megawatts higher than it is now, and our energy consumption is about the same. So we've done really well considering in the last 14 years. Basically, we've seen the growth in the city, but our numbers have gone down. And I think that's a real credit to what you guys have been doing and the efficiency measures you've taken. So I think that looks really good.
Appreciate that.
I'd like to compliment you on this report. It was very informative and succinct, and I appreciate that.
Thank you, Eileen.
Joe, has there ever been a consideration to try to get 100% electrical fleet for the city? I mean, it's down here, sorry. Has there ever been any considerations of making all of our fleet electric as much as practical? Because, I mean, we're a small area, and it seems like we would have the ability to go get a fleet program to get a lot of electric vehicles and still, maintain the services that we currently have.
We are investigating that. The challenge, typically, specifically with our various shops and specialty vehicles like the bucket trucks, is that the industry hasn't quite gotten to the point where we've got the medium-sized trucks that have the space that will meet our needs to do the work that each division needs to do. But as the industry adapts and those resources become available, we'll certainly be open to exploring that option.
I would recommend very strongly that we do not do that, because when the
Okay.
power goes down and we need our trucks, they gotta run on diesel. Florida just had that problem, okay? I was a witness to it online, because they had to bring generators in to recharge the line trucks and the bucket trucks to get them up in the air to work, okay? That's not something we need to do on our utilities. The runaround cars and stuff like that, I can recommend hybrids over EVs, because I've got a hybrid that I just finished rebuilding, and that is a win-win, because you've got a gasoline-powered engine running a generator to charge up your batteries. So you've got the best of both worlds. But to have a bucket truck or a line truck run on natural gas, LNG, or propane or electric, it's not gonna work. In fact, just today, as a sidebar, Ford just recommended your all-electric trucks do not run the heater. It will discharge the batteries to where you can't drive the truck.
Appreciate the information.
Any other comments on the presentation?
Yeah, I think I just have one question I didn't understand. On slide number 6, which just shows that only 3% of the energy usage is with the city.
Right?
And I'm thinking slide 8 answers my question, but the usage by the city does include all the sports fields, the area lighting, and streetlights and all that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And it's only 3% of the total.
The streetlights are not metered,
Yeah.
so the
oh,
streetlights are not included in that. So it's the metered consumption.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Yeah, I agree with Eileen, that was a great presentation. I had a few comments on the draft IRP. So does anybody else have any comments on the draft IRP?
No, it's good.
Okay, I guess I'll just go ahead and read. There's a handout there, so it's on the podium, but I'll just read. So going through the presentation and the draft on it that was included in the packet, I just found a couple things, and I thought this was for a action, but I see that this is not an actionable item. So, but it's helpful to, if we can get these corrected. So on page 7, unfortunately, I guess the way I wrote it out, it might not be as clear. But it was, the bullet, first bullet, I think, might still be related to, the last 18 through 22nd IRP, and I believe the last bullet says 12 months of 2017, so if that can be on page 7, just look at that. On page 10, I think it was just an internal note to say, should the proposal rebates be changed, and I thought that would be helpful to put in the new rebate. On page 12, it talks about the 2008 recession and how it was corrected, or it was not modified, but helped by 2013. And I didn't know if that was still part of this IRP, or if that should just be updated to something else. So just on page 12, if you'd look at that. Page 13, just make sure that the table ends up in one page, so you've got the one table on 2 pages. And the calendar year, so as we talked in the slide, that estimate, look at the estimate for 22. There's a new governor's certified population, which is the footnote on page 13, and you were going to look at that. And then, so the forecasts on page 13, it says forecast bases needed to be updated. I think the verbiage is 2018 through 22. I think it just needs to be 23 through 27. On page 15, you've got number 6, first paragraph, contracts that you said extended through 2026, and I don't know how you want to do it. You've got 3 different extensions, 52, 57, and 67. So I think that was just another one that didn't get caught from the old one is all. So possibly might help. On the price marketing megawatt table, the energy budget, if you could look at that, because 2023 showed a 6.9, and Silver State showed that it was a 7.3 estimated amount for this year. So if you just check to make sure that those were, because I would think you'd want to use the Silver State's estimate on that. Again, if you take that and make it a 1-page, make sure it falls on 1 page. And I understand it's a draft, so just to ask. The town site solar, I saw that it had 3 different numbers on it. I don't know if there was an average being done there or something, but from what I can read from the contract, it's just always going to be, for the entire contract, it's 39.95. And there was 3 different numbers associated that within the table. So just if we can keep that consistent, so somebody doesn't think that it has a variable cost to it, would be helpful. That's all that I found. Was there anything else? Anybody else saw anything? Okay, thank you very much. So, yeah, I think, so then your next stage is going to just update that and take it to the city council and get it approved and send it off to Western, correct?
Yeah, the plan is to have a final draft sent to Western before the end of the calendar year. Here's a final draft, and then have it brought to council in January, certified and sent to Western in January.
Okay. Well, thank you for bringing it to us. I appreciate that we can have a chance to look at it and also be a second pair of eyes for you.
I appreciate all the feedback.
Any other comments?
Nope, did a good job.
Okay, so then we will close out item number 2. Item number 3 has been removed from the agenda. We will go to item number 4, which is my presentation on a rate on the electrical utility rates. It's my continuing presentations. So if I can get the clicker. Thanks. Okay. So you'll see that that they've also included handouts for this presentation, so it'll be easier to follow. So thank you. guys, for getting that done. I greatly appreciate it. It helps, and for your presentation also. Appreciate the handout. Okay, there we go. So we've got a little bit of time, a little more time than I thought, but I still will try to do it at a reasonable speed. And if we need to, we can come back to them if we have time. Okay. Okay. So the goals, I guess we can go through this. It's similar to what we did in the water presentation. And we're just trying to, the first one, so since we did the water, I'm trying to do a comparison. So through the slides, I'll just do a little comparison of electric and the water. There's going through. I think a big portion of the presentation is the continuing aspect of the electric and general rate concepts. The rate structure, I want to emphasize the importance of the rate structure. We'll go, and we won't be going over the rate history, but if we have time, we can come back. But there's a few things from the rate history. So I've included the rate history in here. Let me go back and start from the beginning. One thing too is, as you'll see, and as you hopefully you had time to review the packet, most of these slides are very busy. The reason they're busy is I was trying to make it stand alone the best I could so you could see what was going on without a lot of explanations. So it's not the best thing for a slide presentation, I know, but I was trying to get the information across the best I could. So in some of the cases, we'll go through a little faster, some will go through a little slower. Same type thing as we did with water, just trying to say, here's the fiscal year 23 budget, here's the starting point and how the rates, the structure and all this, how all this interacts. Then we just show how the current rate, okay, they got that, how the rate structure interacts with the revenues and expenses. If there is a way to modify some of this stuff, there isn't as much, I think, need for energy modification as some of the water could be. But again, we can talk about even the RFP or something that there's a lot of variables that can be discussed and you might want to look at. Okay, so I think the next, so we'll just go ahead and go on. This one's one of the important ones, I think. So the basic rate concepts for electrical. So what, in my opinion, what you've got is your major contributors to a rate increase are your purchase of electricity and your capital. So right now, the last 5 years was about 5.7 average of purchased electricity. Going forward, it's an average of 7.1. So you've got $1.4 million more going in a forecasted future year period. So that's another rate issue we'd have to do. Capital, as I'll show you in the next slide, went from 16.2 million from the May of 2021 to 42.2 million in May of 2022. So we'll go over that. But that's the major issues that we have to accommodate in a rate aspect. Maintenance, I think, was a little confusing because we had with COVID, we went down and then we went up. So trying to look at the history of maintenance and stuff, I was thinking that was a larger amount. It could be, it might not be. In the 5 future years, maintenance isn't as big of an issue. Personnel, though, is a pretty big issue, is a reasonable personnel, is a little bit one way. It went from, let's see if I've got that on here. From fiscal year 23 to 28, the estimated increase is almost $1 million in excess in salaries. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I'm just saying that's something that we'd have to accommodate in a rate process. As you see there, electrical workers, I think Greg has brought up that in the past, is that it looks like Boulder City is probably under the national average for the electrical workers, the linemen, et cetera, wages. So that's, I believe, is being currently looked at, and that could be an additional expense. Looking at the rates and rate structure, again, I think the rate structure has the capability of establishing a fair rate base for the electrical groups, so the residential or commercial. So instead of doing a cost of service, I think that, as we'll get to, you'll see that we have 9 different schedules that are associated with electrical. And I think that has been established over the years to help sort of break out the different costs that are needed and how you, for instance, time of use. You're going to charge a large amount for time of use during peak demand because you have to buy off-peak power. So those are things that are trying to put it in categories. So I think I would prefer looking at the rate structure and what we currently have instead of a cost of service, which is subjective. And I think you really have to understand Boulder City, whereas the rate structure is already there. I think it's better served, and we can talk about that more in the RFP, hopefully. Data collection, that's another big one to understand. What is the estimated energy? As I'll point out in the future, are we thinking that energy or load's going to go down, or is it going to go up, or what? Just today, you'll see 3 different numbers. In the RFP, you're showing 157 million megawatt hours of capacity for a possibility in fiscal '23. The Silver State shows 149 is their estimate and the city that in Raftillus' spreadsheet, they're showing about 150. So we've got all these different numbers, and that's a major portion to how are we going to collect? What are we going to collect money off of? So what do we expect the revenues to be? So 150 and 157, there's a big rate difference right there, what we expect to get. So those are, and losses, what are we doing on losses? Eileen, did you have a?
No, I just.
Can't get it. Understanding electric users and user accounts. I've got a slide on that if we have time, I'll go into detail. If not, just a quick aspect. Wholesale and service charges. So right now, I'm focusing more on, in this slide presentation, that we would change the energy rate, not the service charge. But, everything can be discussed. Just as I broke out, we don't break out wholesale rate for the average customer. The wholesale rate is only for the city, but that's actually a municipal charge. It's different than the water because the municipal rate, so we'll talk about that a little bit. Offsets, we lose our last offset, and I'll show you that in a slide this year from the voter-approved capital or leases. Expenses, so I think it's the admin funds. It'd be something that I would definitely like to talk about in the near future. Electrical has 57% of all the admin funds. Water has 30%. Sewer has 10, and landfill has 3. Sewer and the landfill are understandable, and I think when this was established, possibly electrical was bringing more money in. Right now, I think electrical and water are more their revenues are closer, something we might want to think about. The higher that amount is, and it's about, I think there's $900,000 difference between what the electric has to pay in fiscal year '23 and what water has to pay for that. So that's something else that adds to the rate. So it's just something that if we can sort of, as I'll show in another one, equalize that a little bit more, something at least to talk about. O&M and capital. O&M is something that your rate is going to have to be established for. You have to cover the O&M at all times, and you want to make sure you're covering the rising costs. Capital is going to be an up and down, and hopefully once we get most of the infrastructure complete, which I guess is going to range anywhere from 6 to 10 years, we should be in a little better shape. So that's the thing I'm just trying to point out with that slide. Okay. Any questions?
No.
And then just as general concepts here, so here's just general concepts, but the one on here, and again, this is the best data I could find. If we go down to electric and water losses, so we got line and equipment losses would be sort of good to understand. Non-metered energy, I believe, Joe, you're looking at more so we can see what's going on and maybe, so your updates, you're working on that. The city lights, so the data that in the Raftillus' report or their spreadsheet is that it's 1.7 million is a year for the street lights, and that has to be covered by the whatever retail is retail is collected, not wholesale cost. It's considered losses. So, Joe, do you have any idea that what how much savings might be done once everything's done with the LED?
I don't have that data off the top of my head, but I can get back to you on that.
Okay, because that would be a good savings, and it's just, again, there's just showing how much the data and how much variables we have to try to understand and trying to get a fair rate is all. As far as water goes, you know, it's being shown that we have a 10% loss in water. You know, it'd be interesting, are we talking about line losses from Southern Nevada to Boulder City? Are we talking about line losses from the last Southern Nevada water point to all the citizens? I think it's a little bit of both. And so with all these corrections we're making, are we going to be able to reduce that or not? You know, if we even cut that in half, then that's some of the savings Water Boulder City could save, I would think, for everything. Again, the data collection's important. Trying to get at revenues and then just looking at the different expenses. This slide just shows you that we have 9 different schedules. And these are all related to what we'd be able to collect off the retail. And then you also have a municipal rate section that explains what the city pays. And then I show that as it says there in 15 and 14 and 15. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Two of the other things that sort of can affect revenue is you're going to be able to collect additional revenue with the purchase of Power Rider. Now, the interesting thing that I found, and so again, for further discussion later on, is that this was established in 2002. When it was established to say, okay, when the wholesale cost exceeds 4 cents, then we would have to charge the cost. We would activate the section. At that time, the residence was only 4 cents, so it was interesting. Then in 2009, they raised it to 6 cents, and the residential rate is 7 cents. So it's something we might want to consider raising, because we're now at 8, almost 9 cents, and the next rate's going to have to go up. So it's just something to think if we might want to raise that from 6 cents to 7 or something like that. So we're not activating it every year. The credits, Section K, credits for energy generated and renewables, you know, this is something we need to talk about more in the future. The solar, we need to get more information on because the credits that the public gets and the aid they get is good for the customer, but it doesn't help the city. And we still have to have the same exact infrastructure no matter how much solar, because we have to be able to supply the power off peak when the solar's not running. And some people would have battery backup, but very, very few will. So it's just another subject we want to get to in the future.
One thing on the solar, though, to defend that a little bit, is that summertime peak megawatt that solar is peaking capacity. We don't have to go ahead and pay premium prices for it too, so that needs to be factored into that.
Okay, as long as we have it though, if we end up with a major storm. But I guess maybe with the storm, you probably have less air conditioning and stuff like that. So it's just a subject I'd like to go over. I'm just looking for the facts. I'm not trying to disclaim anything. But thanks. So, and here's another eye test. So this one, I was just trying to keep it in 2 slides the best I could. And again, I found it interesting, some of the different ways that it was established. Same thing with the water. It was originally established in 1960 as an ordinance, and then it was changed to, in the code in 1977, and our first resolution was in 1978. The one thing that would be helpful, and I state it later on, is that the whereases in the electrical don't help us hardly at all. There's a few through the resolutions that help, but most all of them are like this repealed this, and the latest one, that's all it does. It just says, so it doesn't say we had an increase because of this or not. So it would definitely be helpful for the future ones to have the whereases be helpful, say why we're doing it. The last one that we reduced it, the title said it, but a whereas did not, and so it just is helpful. It'd be really nice if we could go and put in the whereases that in the current one that says it was just an increase or something, but because the sewer resolutions, their whereases really help. It states what happened each year, so it's just something to think about. Just explains it, and it makes the history a lot easier to follow. In this one, it's a little bit interesting if you can, and you can barely see it on the handout too, but on March 14th, 1978, associated with that resolution, on the very bottom, you'll see that the Schedule F, or Section F, bulk rate schedule for the master meter. And then in 1982, that bulk rate meter schedule was changed to residential bulk rate. And it might be interesting to see if that's really, if that bulk rate is related to truly residential, or if we should just put it back to, if that residential master meter is related to residential, or should just be changed back to bulk rate, just to make it a little clearer. So there's a lot of things, I think, when we get to the time that we can modify the resolution, if we do end up with a rate adjustment, which we most likely will, then there's a lot that I'd like to review in the resolution.
Clean it up.
Okay, so the next page, I don't think there was anything on that. Just in case you're wondering on the format, is that in the old resolutions, they said cents, and that's how the rates were, and then the new resolutions are related on dollars. So I didn't clean up the format, I just sort of showed it the way it was in the resolution. So that's why it's cents in part of it, and then dollar related to the cents in the last part. Okay, I think this is another one that's relatively important, is just trying to bring up, is that the difference in what can affect the rates. So what we've got is you've got a carryover from fiscal year '22, if I'm reading the city manager report correctly. So what we have, the difference between what was carried over in the past and what was expended is 2.2 is still to be spent in fiscal year '23 for ongoing projects. And then we have the fiscal year '23 was revised from 13.8 down to 13.3, but we still have an estimated amount of $19.6 million that could be completed in fiscal year '23.
Is that number, the 19.6 is projects that are in queue? In other words, that's what we've got to take, and that's our encumbered amount for the carryover from FY '22?
The 6.2, it would be, and again, it's not, I don't believe it's fully encumbered, and that's one thing I guess we can talk about in the future. It's just, that's what's been budgeted for and associated with the ongoing projects, the 6.2. Same thing with the 13.3, that's what's been budgeted for this year, and that's what Joe has gone over in projects in the last couple of months.
Meetings.
If you look at the 5-year average, you'll see that in May of 2021, the fiscal year '22 through '26 was estimated to be 16 million. And in May of this May, it was fiscal year '23 through '27 estimated to be 42. And it was explained why a lot of the costs have been recalculated and a lot of things happened, but that's still 26.2 or $3 million increased in 1 year that is majorly going to affect a rate. And so it's something we need to look at. So that's the reason why I make this statement. It's just a statement, is that you possibly, you could look at trying to push some of the projects out. If anything can be proved that it's not critical, then we need to look at it. I think what we're trying to say is the infrastructure, I think we all agree, the infrastructure is very important, and none of us here are stating that we want to drop anything that is of major importance. What we're trying to do, I think most of us have spoken out in the last several years, is that we just like to see it, if there's any way we can balance it. Just as this year, $13 million in 1 year is a large hit. And then there's several hits in the next several years. So that's what I'm trying to look at. the uncertainty of energy cost is a big factor that for rates in things. So we've got the average for the next 5 years is 7.1, as I stated a little bit earlier. And then to clarify the next bullet, it's actually about 5.7 is the 5-year average of the last 5 years. And then, so it's just as we're going through the same thing with water, but the energy, actually, there's a lot more customers that pay retail than like in water. So that's something we'll go through and we'll show some information on, but it's still trying to understand how we're collecting the data, how we're collecting the revenue. Any questions? Okay. Just the basic slide about what we're trying to go through and what I'm trying to do. So another one that can't see too well. So this is just, again, sort of this is somewhat of a starting point. So we say, okay, here's what we budgeted for, what the budget was for fiscal year '23 as of May 25th. So you can see that the revenue is estimated to be 16.7, so I'll go over some of that. You've got operations, you've got purchase of electricity, non-electricity, transfer of funds. You'll see that the admin fund's a large amount for the electric. So you have 13.2 for expenses, and you have 13, so with the revised expenses, you have 13.3. So again, that's a big difference between O&M and capital, large capital. One of the things to point out in this portion, and I'll show it again later, is that this is the last year, so you'll see the transfer in voter-approved capital improvement fund, the $2 million. This is the last the utilities will see for an offset towards any capital. So I'm hoping that we can at least have some open discussions on offsets, because with all this, with the major increase, it would be very helpful to have some type of offset with that large capital amount. Okay, so I think that's the major point on that slide. Just want to point out on this, so this is just a statement for what the Silver State has, is that they estimated the 149 million kilowatt hours for fiscal year '23 with a cost of $7.3 million. And the interesting fact, if I'm understanding everything correctly, is that the SCE invoices us for estimated energy. So they're estimating what's going to be for the next month, and that's what we pay. Whereas the SNWA charges us for what was used the month previous. So it's just something, again, I don't know how much it affects the rate, but the more we understand these variables, the better off we can move forward. Okay, so then we've got, so here's, this was actually what was in, pretty close to what was in one of the old IRPs, so I thought this showed it a little bit easier than the resolutions do to sort of break out the rate schedules. So residential rates as, so this is what Joe also showed in his, similar to what you showed in your presentation. Same numbers, just a little different format, but came out of the IRPs. And there's the general service, so that we can start here. So this is where it's a little confusing. It's just, again, when you're comparing things, in water, it's a little bit easier to understand what commercial is. In electrical, it's a little hard. You've got commercial, you have, so everything's sort of lumped in to general services, which is good because it's general services, but when you consider when people talk about commercial, in here in the general services, you have pretty much everything but the municipality and the residential are lumped in here. So you have nonprofit, you have large, you have small, you have all sorts of industry and commercial. So trying to understand the users, I'm not trying to pinpoint anybody, but it is sort of understanding how things fall into the category, and that's sort of a way to look at a cost of service is that who falls into the category and how do they use the power? So is it, or is it should be a little bit less, is it should be a little more? That's sort of the things I think, again, the rate structure helps that more than a cost of service does. So that's partly what I'm trying to get there. But this is just shows you to look back at these as I go forward with other slides. Again, trying to find a way to look at the charge of services. We've got so we'll just go to the next slide where it's important. So let's go to, this is I think another one where start getting at some of the meat of everything. Okay, so from what I can understand, well, as you see, the city, in the budget, the city is estimating that there should be a revenue of 16.7. So from what I can understand from the data is that you have basically 4 categories where that rate would come from. Let me see, 4 categories. And again, if I'm missing something, I'd be happy to correct anything. So this information came out of Raftyllis's data, so it was estimated that for fiscal year '23, this would be the amount of energy that would be available, that each schedule would most likely use as an average. So you've got the different tiers, so that would be all of the tiers are in each schedule. Then you have the amount that would be collected. So the energy charge would be collected. You have the demand charge, you have the annual customer charge, and then you have hookup fees. And I believe the hookup fees is partly hookup fee and partly penalties, if I'm understanding correctly. And so what I can calculate based on 150 million kilowatt hours is about 16.4. So again, all I'm saying is that there's a lot of variables and to understand of what we might collect and what might not be there.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
This chart is an estimate, right? It's not
Correct.
actuals?
correct. As it states in the top of the thing, estimated
So
energy.
one that's really important that everybody has to know is on the committee, Boulder City Hospital just energized their solar this last year. So that amount of consumption is gonna go down because they're running on solar right now.
And so I think the city gave me some information on that, and I will show it later on, but thank you, is that, so that 2.1 actually will probably go down to about 1.4. It's, they've got a really big input from the solar, if I'm reading the data correctly. So there again, you'll have less revenue to collect it against that 16.7 that was estimated. So it's showing too the very important aspect of the budget and what we need. So you got the budget, you got revenue requirements, you got all these variables that you've got to figure out before you even start the rate process. And again, the accounts too. So the accounts, so that's using the 7,143 compared to the 7,088. You know, those are variables trying to figure out. We've got new housings, understanding in. So I'm not trying to show anything. I'm just saying there's a whole bunch of variables trying to figure out what we would do. And in the RFP, that's the data collection is a big portion of that RFP or the rate study period. And so just some really big factors we got to look at. Going about the accounts, it's interesting. So again, just looking at the variables, not pointing any fingers, not saying anything's wrong or right, just trying to understand the facts, is that if you look at, on the left-hand side, the different accounts for, and these are estimates, so, you know, we'd have to try to figure out, because the last ones, I think, were done in 2021 or so, and so these are estimated going forward. This is, so those could be wrong too, for the electrical, and the same thing for the waters, what they were based on the Raftyllis report for estimated fiscal year '23. But you have 758 different accounts, and so these aren't based on meters, because as you'll see on the right-hand side, the residential multi, that's the accounts, not the meters. And so those should be closer. You would think they would be similar accounts in the water and the electrical. There's a lot out there that might be electrical and not water, but 758 seems a little bit high. So it's just something to try to understand, again, before we do any final rate adjustment. The more we understand, the better off we are.
Well, a lot of that has to do with the apartment dwellers as opposed to individuals, because they're not gonna have as many water meters in the apartment complexes.
But actually, that's accounted for in the residential
Yeah,
multi.
maybe so, yeah, you're
Yeah.
right there, that's a good point.
So that's the thing. So I'm happy to take any, to take any advice or to look at it. I'm just pointing out, I was just saying these are variables that we want to understand.
Good point.
Larry, I'm sorry, can you go just kind of skim through that one more time?
Okay, so if you look at, so the big issue is that, so overall, we've got different accounts, in that we have, if you look at the last bullet, we have 758 more accounts in electrical than you do in water. And if you look at the residential, accounts, you have 7,000, and in the, water accounts, you have, we have, should have added those together in the cases, but yeah, you've got almost, you've got 7,000 also. They're similar because these are accounts. These aren't meters. These are, if my understanding, these are accounts. And so what you have is the residential accounts for electric and for water are close, but then we've got, with all these other different aspects, you've got 758 more accounts in electrical than you do in
Gotcha.
water.
Okay,
And it's just something to understand is all.
yep, gotcha.
So do we have more in electrical, or is there some waters that we're not accounting for maybe, or is it just there's that many different things that, there's that many solar tower, not solar, but cell towers or something like that that does use only electrical? So it'd be nice to understand is all.
Those corrals and stuff like that, and all that, individual meters.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
Outhouses, so to speak.
yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
So on this one is, again, this is something that I've broken out. This isn't the way that the city would do it, because but it's just a matter of, again, it sort of brings up some of the things we want to understand. On the left-hand side, on the second part, down with the table, you see that the city for this year is paying 0.0365, and that's how the municipal rate is estimated. So if I understand correctly, it's taking the estimated energy from fiscal year 2021, yeah, the fiscal year 21, because that would be the full calendar year we'd have, is that what that has, and then so it'd be the calendar year, but the estimated energy for SSE, for Silver State, is 0.049. So if you look down, first thing you're gonna see is that the hospital is at a higher amount than we expect to come this year. Like I said, it's 2.1, and the information I saw, it's gonna be closer to 2.4, 2.5, or something like that. And, again, estimating energy is not easy, but that's the best we can do. So having all this so I would suggest we look at the municipal rate and see, would it be feasible to change it? Just, if we're paying on an estimated amount, maybe the city should just pay the estimated amount, because otherwise you're not gonna collect the same amount that is being estimated. So you're estimating 7.3, but you're not necessarily gonna collect that if we aren't paying the same amount. Something to think about, but it shows you that, okay, so we're estimating about 7.3 to be collected from the average cost, and then the other revenues would go towards your expenses, et cetera. So again, just a way to sort of break out the cost, and this is pure estimated numbers. This is using what was on Raftillis' spreadsheet compared to the 149 that was estimated from Silver State. So then we go to the next slide. So this is what same thing I did with water, just sort of showing you, okay, here's the, Silver State had estimated this amount of cost. If we looked at the slide above, and you bring in the 7.319 into the estimated wholesale revenue, that's what you're going to use to offset that. And you've got the other revenues that are going to try to offset the other expenses. And then, like I said, this is the last year we'll get the offset for for the voter approved. And one thing I didn't point out in the budget was that they also anticipated, at the very bottom, you'll see the 9.3 million is what was anticipated that was needed out of the unrestricted cash to make this, to balance out this year. This is another one trying to is comparing water aspect to power. So in the electrical load, and again, in the IRP, it showed that the city load was only 4 million, and Raftillus is projected 6 million, but last year, I believe it was 6 million, if I'm looking at, or at least see 21, not 22, but 21. So I just need to make sure that, there again, need to check our numbers and see what's going on there. That one I believe is an estimate, and so maybe it was, but it was coming down from what it was used before. So, if with the numbers I have, we're showing that the city is only 4% of the overall energy load, whereas in water it's 37%. So in water, there's a whole lot more of retail the retail has to cover for the infrastructure, whereas in the electrical, there isn't as much, the retail doesn't have to cover as much of the infrastructure. It's on a little bit more of a fair basis, or better way to say that. So that's what this slide is just trying to say, is trying to look at the load and the municipal rate, et cetera. Again, trying to understand the golf courses aren't as a big of an issue as they are in water, but it might be something we can talk about in the future, just to see what, because that's a city load that they're only paying municipal rate for. So they're not helping towards the infrastructure for electrical either. So it's something just to think about. The city lights, that's the best approximate number I have. And it, as Joe and I both have stated, that is not part of the city load. So the retail rate payers pay for the city lights. And so if the LED goes down, that's one, LED helps bring that down to be one less aspect against the rate. Okay, so trying to just make sure that I'm understanding the power rider more is, so I just put this together to sort of show, again, we're actually gonna collect a little bit less because I was using the amount out of the Raftillus spreadsheet. And so the hospital of 2.1 is most likely gonna be a lot less. In this case, it's not gonna be as big of a difference. But out of a calculation and trying to explain the way I understand it to be with the power rider, we would collect approximately 193,000 for the year between October and 1st and of 22 and 23. But the city does have to pay that. It is part of this. The city does have that rider also, as you'll see in that slide. Okay. I think I'll just go ahead and read this slide. So some of the issues that we're looking at, what I said beginning is, a big portion is that, okay, are we looking at an energy reduction or an energy increase? The one question, just off the top of your head, Joe, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but do you have any idea of when the city sort of thinks that the efficiency is gonna start slowing down? So, because what we have right now is you've got, people are still buying new HVAC systems, you're buying still more efficient refrigerators, or you've got certain appliances that make a difference. And I think, hopefully, one of our council members, if you can help me, one of our council members that passed away was pushing for the LED lights.
Oh, Jorge.
Jorge. And so he was really pushing that if everybody were to replace their lights for LED, he thought that would be a big conservation.
It's a big load, that incandescent lighting. It's a big
Yes.
load in homes.
So that's one of the things that's one of the things we can do. So I guess I interrupted my question. I apologize. So do you have any idea when the city sort of expects the efficiency to slow down or stop?
Is in regards to the LED
No,
lights, or in
just-
regards to the rebate program?
No, just when we think most of the houses will be updated into efficient appliances and stuff. So sooner or later, you know, because I just replaced my 60-year-old HVAC, and so most people are gonna be running into the same thing. The old houses are gonna be having to replace them.
Sure.
If they haven't already done it, so, and then most of the newer housing is gonna have a lot of efficient, so there's gotta be a time where we start dropping off, and then we could be climbing instead of reducing with our efficient, if I'm saying it right.
Yeah, I mean, based on the numbers we see in rebate customers and then expanding the program, we're still estimating 1.2% in energy savings as part of the rebate program annually
So you're still at least 5 years or a little more than that.
for the next 5
At
years,
least
yeah.
5 years at least.
So that's a good question. Are you working with the building department and permits on air conditioning changeouts? Are you tracking that? It might help to do that, to get an idea of how fast that's actually happening and how many units a year we're seeing converted from the old, maybe a unit that's 15 or 20 years old, to a new unit.
We track the number of rebates,
Okay,
but we don't track the number of changeouts that aren't applied for in a rebate.
that might be interesting to get the building department to start tracking that for you, because they could do that. Anytime you have a permit issued to change out an air conditioner for an upgrade, maybe have them just log that, get the size, how many tons a unit is, and just kind of get an annual number and see how that affects us.
Okay, yeah, that's good information, thank you.
Yeah, because with the rebate, tracking the rebates with only a 60-day window, if the installer does that, then you probably get a good chance that it's done. If the owner does that, there's a good chance they won't get it done in a 60-day
We
window.
are increasing that to 90 days across the board.
Okay, but I'm just saying for past. It's just,
Okay.
we might not have an accurate account because you might not have had as many people apply for the rebate because it was such a short window.
Sure.
Again, I'm just trying to point out the many variables that we've got. You know, so how many houses do we expect and to be built around the BC Creek? And is that gonna happen in the next 5 years, or is that gonna be, you know, we're still, I understand we've been discussing it for a couple of years now, so we don't really know when that's gonna happen. But that's gonna be 100 or so many houses, so that would be more revenue, but we probably can't put it into a revenue study because it's uncertain. So those are things that would be nice to know. You know, the increase of the energy and water wholesale costs. The energy is going up and down like a yo-yo. Well, not, you know, sort of. Water is just pretty much just increasing. But I think if we can understand the different schedules and look at it, I think we can work within the schedules, and it's not just. Some of the ways I've done it, and some of it is somewhat based on percentages, but some of it is going to be, do we want to increase a schedule or work with a schedule and not just put a percentage to it? So we know that we're going to need 20% more revenues, so don't just increase all the schedules by 20%. Let's look at each rate schedule and figure out how to work with it. The tiers, as I'll show, you know, right now the electrical. The commercial rate has 2 tiers, up to 3,000 kilowatt hours and everything above 3,000 kilowatt hours. Well, I think a lot of utility commercial uses anywhere from 10, 20, 30, 60,000. So it seems a little strange that it's only 2 tiers like that. But I guess looking quickly at some of the other ones, other neighbor valley people use a similar aspect. Again, I don't want to. It's nice to understand why somebody else does it, but Boulder City is different, so I want to always keep in mind that we are different in Boulder City, and that sometimes we can't say, well, our neighbors in the valley do it, we should do it. It's not bad to look at it, but we don't necessarily want to say we have to do it just because they do.
Well, and one thing too, most of our commercial accounts are mom and pop type stores, small stores, as opposed to you get to Henderson, Las Vegas, and they're large because they're serving a much larger population, so that individual proprietors are much larger than what they would have in Boulder City.
Well, especially when you talk to the casinos.
Well, yeah, or even a air conditioning installer or a contractor, you know.
Gotcha.
They'll have maybe 20 trucks out there. We have maybe 1 or so, something like that.
So all I'm trying to do here is be fair. I'm trying to look at the proper numbers to be fair. I'm not trying to point anybody out, you know, and it is, as you will see in some of the slides, right now, the residential does have an average rate lower than the commercial. And in what I had to project as a possible scenario, the commercial has a larger average cost. And so it's just, we might want to adjust that a little bit, so there might be something that says, okay, yes, we might want to look at the cost of it, but I still don't think we need a cost of service. I think we can sort of work within the boundaries that we already have and say, let's work it. So let's not spend a good portion of that rate study money for a cost of service analysis that is subjective. Service charges and then offsets. If we can look at, so service charge are we reasonable with what we're charging, or do we want to consider it? I didn't look at any service charge changes in this presentation, but you know, everything is up in the air. Offsets, I would hope we could discuss offsets. You know, I understand that since we were split out, you know, it's looked at, okay, they want the enterprise to pay for itself, but the city gets a lot of a lot of lease money, and you know, so we are getting 5 megawatts from one of the solar. We have a contract, but otherwise, though, can't the utilities get some advantage from the lease money also? It's just a thought, and can we talk about it?
You know, a question on that with these, do we know how many acres are still available in the El Dorado Valley for solar? And have we expanded the original? I know when I was here years ago that there were just only so many 6,000 acres or something like that were set aside for solar, and I don't know if that number has been changed, or we have that valley that goes up between us and Henderson. That's I can't remember the name of the valley right now, but that's an area that could be future solar if we're not going to do anything else with it. You know, so.
That's where San Diego Gas is talking about building their battery storage, and that's turned into be a real boondoggle, because that's all lava flow. That's really rough trenching. So I think, based upon when I was out there working, they were building 2,800 acre solar farms, and I think we're darn near almost to the last acreage we got. I know that they had to do a land swap on the last one for, what was it, Copper Mountain 7 or 8? They did that.
I don't know on the top of my head. I can get back to you on the.
Well, I'm just saying I remember they had a land swap because they had to get some parcel of land from another area or location to take and put that into the Tortoise easement, and that's how they got that last Copper Mountain 7 or 8, I think it was, on the southwest end of the original Copper Mountain Solar 1.
Okay.
And that's something the city might want to look at is, and I'm not sure where that's at because I haven't followed it, but we've got a lot of acreage. I mean, we've got a few square miles out here in the southeast corner of the city over here, the other side of the freeway, that's just vacant land, but that's in the old city town site. And there's not the restrictions on that. And that's an area that could be potentially developed for solar, and it's still close to Meade Substation. So, I mean, that may be a change in thinking around here, but that's something that we might look at. And I think we ought to make it a point to, if we do that, solar leases in the future, that we tie more energy coming back to the city as part of the deal, you know, so something to look at.
We do explore that. The challenge for us right now, as you can see, if you can remember or flip to the load purchases from the FY23, is that for power purchase agreements, the way they fund these projects, they're looking for over a year's worth of time. So they're looking for firm power over a 12-month period. And so if we don't have that need, then we're going to have to offload the existing resources that we have. And so that would be kind of giving up hydro that we've got. Now, if we could hedge for some kind of seasonal PPA, that would be like really ideal, but most PPAs aren't structured that way for new solar projects.
Yeah, that's a good point. It may be something that we could build into the formula and see if there would be any takers on it, though. Possibility, but because the land is just sitting there and it's not being used for anything else, and so, you know, something to think about.
Yeah, the one advantage is that, so you're correct, is that if they're building on our land and we can give them incentives that would say we only want the power during this time and we're going to give you a better lease deal. So if we were asking somebody outside of the city to do something, it's very hard to get that. But if we're saying, hey, let's make a deal, then there are sorts of, we can always ask the question. Very seldom has it hurt us to ask the question.
There's a lot of land sitting over on that southeast corner of the city that's just sitting there.
Yeah, so it's something that I think some people have asked that question, and it's just a matter of looking at all the possibilities. So we understand what you're saying, Joe. It's just a matter of, let's just ask the question. If we have to get a year's worth of 100% energy, the city is not in need of that at this point. This is what you're saying, so.
That's right, too.
So we're just saying, let's find out if somebody's willing to make a deal for partial when we do need it. If peak, we can get some type of deal for the peak summertime or something like that.
Or include storage in it.
See what,
That's one of the big things I think we need to start looking at, is storage.
no, the problem is too, yeah,
Someone down here's doing that with their batteries, so,
Yeah.
okay.
good point.
So what I did here, let me start on the lower right-hand side first, just so to do my disclaimer, is that this is intended only as a starting point. There are many variables, and so to review before we can do it. So I just took the best data I could get my hands on, and said, this is a possibility to look at it. One of the ways I was trying to do it, and I didn't have time to do another slide, I was thinking about handing one out, is to show that if we were to say that the average, if everybody paid the exact same amount, what would that be? So let's just say it was, we got 11, 12, 13, let's just say it averaged out to be 12.5 cents that everybody paid and did it. The easy way that you look at it is here's the revenue, and here's the amount of energy that goes against that revenue, and here's the amount that you have it. So you can start there and then sort of go out, but there's still variables you've got to look at. So I went ahead and did it a little more complicated and said, trying to get a best idea of what I would think would happen is it with information I could get. So if having an average of 19.5 or $19.6 million for revenue needed between 24 and 25, that would be a year. If trying to reduce that with the money that we had is saying that we've got $12.6 million in the unrestricted cash as of the end of June 30th. So if you take what we're gonna bring in 23, and you take that, if I'm looking and everything, if I did everything correctly, you would have about $2 million left over, so you could say that you would have $400,000 a year in 5-year period to help reduce that 19.5 in the band, so we could say we would only need to collect 19.1. I was just trying to bring these numbers down because that's a large increase from what we're currently, in the back part, you're looking at the revenue was only for the energy cost was only $14 million. So now we're gonna go from $14 million to, if you look at mine, you're looking at 17.6. So that's a large increase. So I'm just looking at any offset we could possibly get.
I got a question for you, Larry.
Sure.
So on this, are you suggesting that we delay $2 million worth of CIP funds?
Oh, not at all. No,
Okay,
what I'm saying, so this one here says this is what is currently on the books, and this is currently with the money we have. So that this is a possibility.
Okay.
So with the $12 million and the additional amount that we could possibly get in revenue from this year's revenue, then we could theoretically still have $2 million left over at the end of the year. $2 million of the unrestricted cash for electrical funds. And so, but again, this is the best information I had. It's just a starting point. So if this were the case, then we would be able to reduce the 9.5 to 9.1, but it's only if we had this. It's a starting point.
Okay, thank you.
So, but if you look at, so we're saying we need to collect 19.189, and we're only going to collect 19.143. Again, a big difference in that is, first off, well, I've already calculated the energy for the hospital to be less. So that part is I was trying to get that rate schedule is already there. But the city would be based at, is what the average of Raftilius showed was 378 instead of a higher amount of the estimated Silver State. So as long as we have a municipal rate that doesn't match our estimated, it's going to be hard to collect the same amount. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So those are things that I'm trying to point out, and just some of my factors that I'm looking at. Does that make it, is that clear, Joe? Is it clear to everybody else?
Yep.
Sorry.
It's clear to me.
So that's where I'm starting at, okay? So using that assumption, and it's just an assumption, is that, okay, now let's go to what we would possibly do for residential. So we would just say we'd keep the same schedules. I think that these are reasonable tiers for the residential. Joe had suggested 500 as another tier, but as the slide in the IRP shows, nobody fell, a regular average 15 didn't fall into that.
I just want to clarify, that was another utility that uses 500. I wasn't suggesting we do, so Overton Power uses 500 as the first tier.
Okay, so as we were looking at it, so, thank you. So, but I think the residential but as always, this is where I think the rate structure could be reviewed instead of a cost of service aspect, and I majorly harping on that. So again, taking the same information I did from before and saying that if we used on the left-hand side, the 19.1, this is what you could anticipate as per kilowatt hour. Again, this is using, what I did is I didn't explain that in the other slide. So what I did is I took the hospital energy, reduced the energy that was anticipated for this year, because this year sort of fell in as an average of the difference between what could be considered a lower amount of energy and using SCEs at a higher. So SCE was estimating, Silver State was estimating 150 million kilowatt hours a year. Raftilius was averaging about 140, 148, I think, as going down that much. So I just said 150, and that's already pretty much what I'm using for the rest of it. So it sort of fell out pretty easily as about an average of 150 million kilowatt hours. So then that, I've had to break out the different, so the categories for residential came out of what was previously done pretty closely. The commercial, as we'll point out, I had to calculate, so again, it's just the best variables I could get. If we could take, so right now, we either have 37 or 38 million dollars in unrestricted cash that does not include the reserves. So just unrestricted cash for all of the utilities. We have 37 to 38 million dollars. If we took the unrestricted excess money that's already been collected that is not going to be needed for future amounts for water or sewer or landfill, is because if we're looking at theirs, they don't have the big growth or big capital projects in the next 5 years. So if we took $10 million out of that for the 5 years, then you would have $2 million a year that we could help reduce that. So that's what the right-hand slide is doing. I'm saying instead of collecting 19.1, we could only collect 17, and then we would need to collect the amount based on that. So in the right-hand slide, we're trying to collect 10.3 from the residents. In the left-hand slide, we're trying to collect 10.3. In the right-hand slide, we're trying to collect 9.2. You can see the big difference. It's still a pretty nasty amount for the, it's almost 10 cents, 12 and 13 on the right, but you're looking at almost 11, 12 and 14 on the left to try to get a revenue. And as Joe pointed out, and as you see here, so on the IRP, is your 2,000 is what's up to 2,000 is your 90%, 91% of the rate. So you're going to have to make that a reasonable rate. You can't charge, you can't do too much of a conservation on the other one because you're just not going to get it. So if you jack up the conservational rate, you still have to have a reasonable rate for the first 2,000 because that's where you got to collect your money. That's where most of the energy is. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So there's all these variables that I'm trying to get out, and so I'm spending more time, but we have a little bit of time trying to get the point and the emphasis on what should be studied. So what I did, and this where I did say, here's a possible modification. So the same thing is if you use the 19 or the 17, but what I did is, and it's just for, and hopefully you can see it on your, you can barely read it on the handout, but you can see what I thought about doing was similar to what we did with the water. First off, we start with the same category that the residentials have, and we use that for the commercial or general schedule. So if somebody's not using that much power, they're using less than 3,000, then let's give them a break. Now, unfortunately, the way it falls out, because again, that there is a certain amount of energy, is that I couldn't make it even. I tried to put that there'd be so we got 9.4 cents compared to 9.45 in the electrical, is to how I could get it to come out to what was needed to cover. So then there might be some variable that I'm missing that would be something to be able to help that. That's if you have the $2 million of a reduction. But so what I did is saying, okay, so let's look at the same rate for the first one, and then we go up to 10, up to 30, up to 60, and then above 60. So those are just, they're somewhat arbitrary, but if you sort of, I was able to get a little bit of a load from some of Ratilis's data, of an idea of the loads, and that seems to be that a lot of people fall in under the 60. So if we can come up with reasonable rates, and if we can find out how to make that work, and again, I definitely do not want to increase the general or commercial rates. If you increase them too much or too drastically, they're just gonna pass them along. It's not gonna help anybody. So that's one thing we could look at, is how do we sort of get the residential and commercial rates sort of to come in line a little bit better. Again, I don't think we need a cost of service to do that. We can just say, here's the schedules, what's sort of fair, and how does it fall out? You can sort of look at somebody's current rate bill and sort of say, okay, if you adjust this and this, how much more is it gonna be, and is it fair, is it not fair? So those are things that I think we can do if just with some studying. And so that's where, any questions on those? No. Okay, a lot of data, sorry. Okay, review of the sewer rate. So I didn't really have time to go into the sewer, but I think it looks like the sewer's covering itself. From what I can see, the budget and the revenues, the sewer's covering itself. I don't think that there's probably much need, but let's look at when we go into the process, we'll look at the resolutions and just see what's happening. Again, if you look at the current sewer resolution, you'll see how the whereases, they show the whereases, and it's very helpful. It shows what happened in the past. I'm getting close. Sorry, it took a little longer than I expected to get through some of these.
It's a lot of data.
Resolution issues. So let me just read through this really quick. So review the sections of each resolution I've stated in water. Let's go through each section. Let's try to update it. I'm not sure that we've really updated the resolutions and looked at each section closely since probably for about 10 years. So I would suggest that be done. How are the rates and rate structures documented? Trying to understand them more, and that's what those two slides are, a starting process, but I think if we can understand it more, it'd be helpful. Again, I'm saying the whereas sections, if we can work with them. I think we want to look at the municipal rate, and if we're understanding everything, and the Silver State we are paying estimates, we're gonna pay that way for the future, then I think we're looking at the municipality paying the same estimated rate would be helpful. So, and it'd be a little bit easier. I think we might look at the power rider, increase it from 6 to what the city and Silver State think might be reasonable. Is it 7, maybe go up to 7, or even at least 6.5, but 7 I think would be reasonable. But anyway, something to think about.
I'd like to add that we have the rate stabilization fund, which I don't think we had when the original ordinance or resolution was written, to include this power rider. And I think maybe we should look at putting in something that defines when the power rider should be used versus using the rate stabilization fund to make up that difference.
That's a good point. I think the rate is indicating if you're probably, because it's at $3 million, so I think the intent is when you have a really large swing. But I agree with you totally that it would be helpful. I think it'd have that in the resolution, because I don't think we do have anything in the resolution related to that. So, because that's the one thing that the 2016 rate did, is that they were saying, okay, yeah, we've got to get our reserves up to date. That was what one of the consultants did there, was saying, yeah, you need to increase your reserves. And so that was part of the big increase in the rates, was the reserve, but then once the reserves are filled, then you don't necessarily need all that rate. So that's another thing we need to look at, okay, if we go up, can we do something? Can we do something to mitigate a very large rate increase that we just need to come back down from in a few years? That's one thing, I guess, and that's the reason I would suggest balancing out the capital. Because if we have to count for a really high couple years in capital, we're gonna have to really jack up the rate, and then we don't need that in the future.
That purchase power rider was something that we put in when I was there, because just to cover the eventualities that we could have some months when, for whatever reason, we lost our hydro and we had to go out and buy a big chunk of energy, and the capacity charges were just crazy. And it was a way that we could instantly recover that money, and without wondering where we were going to come up with it. And then we could drop it off when the rates went back down, because it was just to avoid those times when you get hit with something you just don't anticipate or expect, and it keeps you from going underwater, and you have a way of recovering that, and the residents kind of understood that's the way it was supposed to work.
And I believe that's where the reserve is also.
Yeah.
That's definitely the reserve. That's what I understood the reserve for. If you lose power and you've got to go out and you've got to spend millions, then that's what you're doing. But but to clarify, these things are helpful, and I think we can help the rate process by understanding all these variables. So again, putting this a little bit more in perspective, I'm thinking that and it's my assumption, is that the 57% was based on certain variables that were established years ago. And so 57, 30%, 10%, and 3%, I would like to see if we could equalize the 57 and 30% and see if we can sort of so that would help each rate. It would increase the water rate a little bit, but it would definitely help the electrical rate. And I think, because I think, in the general aspect, I think all four utilities use them similarly. So to say that electric uses the general funds more than the water doesn't make sense to me. So it's something to look at. Again, understand the future budget years to make sure that we have the averages correctly, and we have the O&M, the capital, make sure we understand that. Is there any revenues or any offsets that we can look at? Calculating the energy for the future. Are we up? Are we down? How will solar affect the demand? So as Ned pointed out, it could help us in some cases with our demand, but it could hurt us if we have to cover it. So it's just, I would just like to understand more of the facts related to that. The city use of solar, I think the parking structures, we have the one here, and we have one that was possibly talked about building. So the city doesn't pay the infrastructure, so it would help reduce their load, and it would be something that possibly could be controlled. So if there was a way to shut off the solar, in case, Josen, you're concerned that we have too much power, then it would be under the city's control. So some of that, I think, would be advantageous to look at, to do. The golf course considerations, it's not as big as the water, but we still might want to look at. They're not paying any infrastructures. How big of a customer are they, and is there something that we could do? The next steps, I'm still trying to work with it. It seems, like I said, there's so many variables. I don't have everything here. Even though there's a lot of data, I still think I'm missing some things here. So it's just some general ideas. So the next step we have in our item 6, we'll talk about the RFP. What I was looking at here was gathering sample data. So again, not trying to point fingers at anybody. What I'm trying to do is trying to look at a baseline to figure out what energy and water is helping the community and what could be a waste of water. So is anybody wasting water? Is the average baseline, I'm just throwing a number out, 60,000, and we've got somebody that's a similar business and they're doing 80, 100 or something thousand kilowatt hours, and then similar with water. So that way we could sort of say, hey, maybe we would do a different tier, and then we might put a tier way out here, or we could put a different category even in, a different schedule to say if these aspects are using different energy that's taken away from our hydro, or just as Ned has said in the past, we didn't necessarily want a big old data farm to come in here and use the hydropower that was taking power away from the residents and causing more power. So if they're going to do that, they need to pay for that. They're causing the market power. So they should be getting something instead of the residents or even a general mom and pop commercial. So I'm trying to be fair to everybody, and that's one thing. I don't necessarily think that sometimes the cost of service is fair to everybody. So I'm trying to find a way to be fair to all the schedules and do it. If the time of use is that might be pretty high, but they're using it. One thing over the hill, just as a comparison, because I'm saying we shouldn't be doing it, but one charge over the hill was 29 cents a kilowatt hour for peak power during peak power. We're only charging 16 cents. So I'm not saying we should jack it up, no way, but we need to look at it. But there are reasons for it. And then I think we just need to discuss the options in more detail as we go through and as we're talking with the RFP and with the consultant, then just trying to cover all the bases and making sure that we understand that Boulder City's different. We're not trying to be arrogant or anything, but we have different aspects than the rest of the valley does. So let's use those instead of hurting ourselves. I appreciate, is there any questions? Okay, again, a lot of data, but I was just trying to do the best I can to understand the variables and get things out there so people are thinking about all the different aspects that go into the rate study. Like I said, the easy way to do it is say, here's the revenue, here's the energy, and you divide it and you're done. But unfortunately, as you see here, it's not that easy. So there's a lot of factors that are to consider.
Larry, I'd like to thank you for going to all the trouble to do this. I know this took you a lot of time, and I really appreciate your time and your insight.
Thank you. Thank you for sitting through it.
Good job, really was.
Yeah, I would like to say the same as Eileen is, I know that Larry obviously has put a lot of time and effort into this, and the experience that he brings to this committee from when he worked for the federal government in this. And one of the things I was thinking about as we going through this is when you go out, when you choose someone to do this rate study, whether it's Raftillus or whoever else bids on the job, I think that the city should be giving them this information from the beginning. I mean, it has to make everybody think. I mean, my mind swims as I go through trying to listen to this, and there's a lot that will go into coming up with the rate study, and that, as everybody says, Boulder City is a little bit unique than Nevada Power. And so I do hope that the city would provide this information to whoever is going to do the job.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Nevada Power, because Nevada Power's, we're talking about normalizing capital spending. Sorry about that. You're talking about normalizing capital spending. Now, Nevada Power, for example, has been trying to do that for a long time, and it's kind of easier for them because they can shuffle from plant to plant, right? They have a lot of different areas. We don't have that resource, those multiple resources to pull from here. They'll say this plant doesn't get this capital improvement because this plant needs it. We've only got our one little utility to do it with, unless they can move capital from sewage or the dump to in that manner, some way to shuffle it around, because there's going to be times when when that capital expenditure is going to exceed what it is budgeted for that year because of some problem, some issue. and we just don't have that other place to pull it from, and if that becomes a sacrificial lamb for it. But, Nevada Power's had problems with all their plants trying to normalize it as well. It's a big challenge, a huge challenge. But if you can do it, it'd be great, absolutely. And I'm curious, the megawatts that we get from Hoover Dam, is that like guaranteed? Is that, where are we at on that list? I mean, when they start cutting people off, are we at the top of the list, first to get cut off, or, towards the bottom?
I mean, everyone's in the same boat. So the pie itself just shrinks.
Oh, it's proportional, okay. Thank you, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. With our 20, we get a certain percent, and so our 20 is already down quite a bit. And so we're all in the same boat.
Gotcha, thank you.
But the one thing is you brought up, and I should be saying and also actually a big kudos to the city, is that we are, and the one thing that Raptilus brought up, they called it pay-go, pay as we go. And so we don't have debt. The water is, we just have that raw line. And so that's a major aspect to the city. And I think that's one thing that we're trying to say as a committee. Whatever we can do to try to mitigate everything. We don't want to go into debt. We don't want to do a bond. We don't want to do it. So whatever we can. And we do have we have a $5 million reserve for extraordinary maintenance, but that's if something happens, the line,
Transformer.
breaks or something, transform or something like that. So if something happens during the year, we do have, there are a lot of things that the city has done to help with the reserves and stuff like that. But you're right, so what we're looking at is like, if there's a way to sort of balance it out to 3 million, 5 million, something like that, where you did a year, instead of 11 million and stuff like that.
Well,
where it's
11 million one year and 4 million the next, and 16 million the following, I mean. yeah.
Right, that's all we're trying to say, is that it just so we can do it. So if there's a project that has to happen and it's critical and so I don't think none of us are saying, hey, we put it off. It's just saying, is there a way that, how important is that, And so an example is Substation 6, just so we can understand the facts. It's Substation 6, we believe, had some upgrades when it did the 69 line loop. And so is it in a need that can we push, that one could possibly be pushed out a little, 5, 6, 7 years, because it's in better shape. Substation 5, it's in pretty good shape. There's some things that need to be done. So do we want to do a full substation rebuild, or can we divide it into a section and do it a portion without causing us more money because we're doing it type things? But just outside the box I think that's all we're asking for. Look outside the box.
Yeah, I think we want to look at like even the substations to see how they're loaded now, and what the anticipated future load's going to be after the 4 kV conversion's all finished, and see, because we're certainly not growing very fast. We haven't been growing very fast for the last 25, 30 years in this town. I don't expect that's going to change, and so I think we can pretty well project where we're going to be in a few years in these substation loadings, and that's all we need to look at and find out how critical it is that when we move on those things, instead of maybe later than sooner,
Really good job, Larry.
It was really good.
Well, again, thank you. Everything's busy. There's a lot of data. I'm just trying to, if you need to go to sleep at night, then maybe this will help.
Yeah, Larry, I really appreciate your efforts, on behalf of the city. It's the amount of time and effort that you put into this is quite remarkable. And I appreciate your peer review of the IRP too, so I know you put a lot of time and effort into this, and I think it will be valuable for the rate study.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the hardest part is coming back out of the rabbit hole with the research.
I think as a committee member, but the other thing is, nobody has gone to find all the history of how our resolutions, our rates were figured and everything else. This is a comprehensive package that people that are coming in to work for to Boulder City need to read this and understand the background of how we were created from a federal reserve to a municipality and a city. And this is a lot of history that I've never seen compiled in what is it, Ned? I've been dealing with this now for 10, 12 years that you've known me and everything else. And this is the first time I've seen a deep dive into how everything was gotten together and created. And this needs to be put in the upfront, to where when somebody comes in new, this is how the city was born. and this is how the rates were created. But the other thing is there's gonna come a point when they go to Deadpool, and then I think as a city that's a municipality, we need to make certain that we have our own backside covered, not depending on somebody else to come to our aid should something happen. So like you're saying, the 5 meg solar that's secured and stuff like this, we've got to look at that. And if somebody wants to come in, like Ned's talking about, that on the other side of the landfill is what we were calling it, was the reason that the Boulder City tap was placed there. Okay, and now that we have a new can out there, 100 MVA, we could be looking at marketing power to come into Boulder City at 69 kV, okay, and offset some of the so-called Hoover A, Hoover B contracts, which are going to Deadpool, are gonna be really quick if we don't watch ourselves. So if we can get a battery storage out there or something like that, or get somebody to entertain a battery storage at 69 kV, at night, we can charge them up, and during the day, peak, shed the peak, shave it. And that's something that we gotta look at.
Yeah, I really do. We have land, and it's in an ideal location as far as sunlight goes. And it's a huge chunk of land that's out of sight, out of mind, out of there, over there on that other side of the city that nobody ever goes to. And it's a great opportunity to put it to work and figure out, we'd have to do a lot of brainstorming and figure out how best to use it, but I think it could be done, and we could be a win-win for everybody, I think.
Yeah, and I also, going back to your statement, Deadpooling is gonna happen. It's just so we might as well plan for it now, as soon as we can, because it could be as early as next year. I mean, really, if you look at the consumption and the rate of the water level going down, it's just not being taken care of the way it should be.
I think that's some conservation issues we'll have to talk about later, and then part of the rate process, and so the IRP. Now, the one advantage is that I did look at the latest Bureau of Reclamation proposal, and the Deadpool actually I think was there. We've got a few itty bitty reprieves that they're looking at that we're probably not going to get to Deadpool before the 2027. So that's not a big comfort, but it's a little bit. So it falls within the IRP. So at least we're looking at that. So it's not real comfort, but a little bit.
When it happens, it's gonna be drastic. It's gonna be pretty serious for Boulder City.
Well, hopefully we can come up with some solutions before it does.
Yep.
So it's not just going to affect Boulder City. It's going to affect Arizona, California. The agricultural as far as water goes. So anyway, I don't want to get off topic, but it's a big deal that definitely. But just remember, Boulder City is only a small portion of it. So I think once it gets closer, people outside of Boulder City are going to be saying, and California and Arizona are going to be saying more than we really need to worry ourselves. So, but it does something to think about. That's a big thing here. There's so many variables that we just need to keep them in mind. Thank you also. So we probably need to move on. So I will go ahead and close item number 4. And again, thank everybody for their patience with that. And we will go to item number 5, update from the utility directors regarding water and power consumption.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Carr. Just to give you guys some information on the most recent water and power consumption for the city of Boulder City. Boulder City continues to lead the way in water usage conservation amongst the SNWA purveyor members. The city's water usage declined by 6.4% from 22 to 21 and almost 20% from 22 versus the 3-year average for the month of October. For the first 13 days in November, Boulder City continued to lead in water usage conservation among SNWA purveyor members. The city's usage declined by almost 25% for the same period in 22 versus 21, and about 24% for the same period in 22 versus the 3-year average. Energy demands continue to decrease for the month of October as seasonal cooling loads drop with cooler temperatures. And as we get into the end of October, you could really see the difference between the daily max and daily min is more of a plateau in the energy demands. And with that, if there's not any other questions, close this item.
I guess the one, so I think with consumption, are we still trying to get a better understanding of the, would that be under this item that we talk about the balancing how SCE balance outs the end of the year with the estimates compared to what actually happened?
So it's my understanding with the balancing annually for the Silver State is that it's done behind the scenes. So it goes into the next year's energy budget. So we'll get, whatever actuals we used, there's a shoring up at the end of the fiscal year, and then that input goes into and drives the next fiscal year's budget.
It'd be really nice if they could put in their estimate, an adjustment line saying that this is money left over, that was the difference between last year and this year. No, between the actuals and estimates. Because from what I'm looking at the estimates, there's no way you can understand that there's a balancing that's happened. It just looks like they're charging us for what, I see no offset at all, at least for this fiscal year. I couldn't see anything.
The offset will occur for the next budget.
No, what I'm saying is, okay, so you look at the schedule. So you've got July through December.
Right.
And then you got your totals, and then they got all the listings of the cost for everything. All the costs are broken out.
Right.
And they're broken out in a manner that there's nowhere you can see that they're reduced or increased the amount due to the rebalancing of the previous year. So there's nothing in that estimate that says there's a rebalancing happened. So for instance, when you do like Hoover, when you do Boulder Canyon project, you have a carryover. And so if you are short, you're gonna owe more. If you're long, that carryover gets tracked through and gets for the following rate process reduces the rate. And so, but it's clearly shown what's happened in the way that Silver State does it, you can't track that.
So for the next year's budget, that I can specifically ask for that, make sure
Okay.
that we got that information so we understand the forecasted energy amounts for FY '24.
Well, the energy amount, but also the dollars. So if we owe because we actually paid less than we should have, then that's shown. If we have a credit, then can we see that credit? So it's a matter of having, all you need is add a line.
Sure.
And they're saying we either owe or we have credit. And then don't include it in some other cost that we never see.
Negative or positive?
Yeah. So that's just a suggestion, so, thank you. Okay, so, anybody, comments on the item number 5? Nope. Okay, so we'll close out item number 5, go to item number 6. For possible action, discussion of the request for proposal requirements for a comprehensive electrical, water, wastewater, and solid waste rate study. So Joe, did you want to start off on that?
Sure, thank you, Chairman Carr. In the packet, you could see that we've got the RFP and the final RFP that went out, as well as the proposal from Raftellus. And so kind of specifically diving in, I'd like to, in the scope of work, when we get into the RFP, what we asked for, the scope of services, kind of go through each. There were 7 phases that were initially called for. Based on kind of previous discussions, all 7 phases may not be needed or desired. I'd like to get some opinion of the committee as to the existing phases, how this was laid out, was the RFP, what worked, what didn't work. So, we've got the, I'm of the opinion that, phase 1 through 3 are necessary, and kind of moving on. And then, if the cost of service analysis is not needed or the rate design is not needed, then you move into the rate model development and utilize the existing rate model that we've already put into place, and then you kind of go and make any specific changes there. So any feedback that the committee members have, we're looking to really initiate this process as soon as possible, get it through the holiday season, and then have something, kind of come back early January.
So to help, I've looked this over closely and I've got it in front of me, so just to help people remind, For phase one is the project initiation and data review. So going through that, I think that looks good to me. I think the way it's written up. But the one thing is I'd like to point out, I don't think all the data was, in Raftyllis's proposal and in what they stated their proposal was they wanted the data before the kickoff meeting. And I think there was a lot of data sent and requested by them for several months. And so I believe that the data collection and review is a major portion of the request. And I think that might even sort of drive some of the costs, because it depends on how much the consultant has to do. So it depends on how when the city expects to be ready to have the data, and how long they would expect the consultant to review that. So I don't know, let's see, so you got, please describe your approach to developing and managing a kickoff meeting. I'm wondering if we should just add something that explains their approach to the review, or what they would do with or need for the data. You see what I'm saying? Trying to, because like I said, I think that's a big issue. So if we can try to streamline that in any way, I think that would help reduce the cost overall. So the stakeholder engagement in Raftyllis' proposal, so that's number two. Phase number two is stakeholder engagement. In that one, Raftyllis proposed to meet with us every month. They did not. So if we have time, we can sort of look at their proposal. I don't want to be overly critical, but it was very frustrating on some of the stuff that happened. And I don't want to do any bashing. But so I think there's something, that's one thing we want to discuss, is that what the city perceives or would like our involvement, and what the committee would have. I think there has been some discussion, the minimum we would want would be to be part of a kickoff process. So the way Raftyllis did it, I believe, was they met with the city and got a idea of what's going on, and then they had a meeting with the city and the committee, a major meeting. So they came into your offices and met with you, and then they met with us in an open meeting. And then we would need to meet, minimally, we would need to meet halfway through, and I would think we'd want to meet at least twice, depending on how long we're talking about. So are we talking that this can be done, and maybe that's what we find out? Is this going to be a 3-month, a 6-month process? What does the consultant think it's going to be?
Their timeline?
Huh?
Their timeline?
Yeah, and then that might decide when we need to be involved. I think it would be good to be involved before they put a draft report out, so we can sort of get an idea, or definitely after, or definitely meet after they have a draft and discuss the draft. So that's one of these things that is the stakeholder deals. The phase 3 is comprehensive electrical, water, and waste and solid waste utility finance plans. And so that's a big issue, and that is, I guess, to see again what the consultant expects to do with the data and to work with. So I'm not sure. I don't think I saw anything in 3 that really needed to be modified. I think the statement in 3 is good. Phase 4 is the cost of service analysis, and this is the one that. So is it okay if I go through all 7 then, Joe? Okay. So phase 4 is the cost of service analysis. Again, personally, I believe that it's very subjective. And so if they use a national way to do it and not the way Boulder City is laid out, and you need to really understand the history, I think, to understand the cost of service, I think it's a waste of money. So I think the best thing to do is to look at the rate structure. I believe that the rate structure is a great starting spot, and we can work within that to decide, and it's sort of the cost of service, somewhat will fall out of that. So the rate, so phase 5, so I would suggest eliminating phase 4, cost of service analysis. Phase 5, rate design. Then the question is this is where I'm trying to make sure I've got my terminology right, is that you've got rate design, rate study, and rate structure. And they can blend, or they can all be separate. And so that's the thing, just to make sure that what we think they are and what the consultant thinks they are. And I think that was part of the problem with the Raftillis aspect, was what I was expecting anyway, myself, maybe personally, and what we received, so as far as rate design. But I would definitely want to try to put the rate structure minimally into phase 5. See if I had an example, I think. So possibly it'd be something similar to add to review the current rate design and rate structure and propose rates which would appropriately and equitably recover the cost of providing electric, water, wastewater, and solid waste services for the city. So by reviewing the design and the structure, and if they give us a proposal, I think that would help us to do it. Does that sound like something reasonable, Joe? And the committee, is that?
Yes.
I think we should add to that sentence, and encourage conservation.
That's yeah, so I think, and that's a great point, because I'm not sure that how much conservation was encouraged with Raftillis's, or the last proposal compared to this.
Absolutely.
So conservation, that's a great point. Okay. So then the rate model, that's another really tricky one. Raftillis's rate model is 55 different spreadsheets. And so then they have what they call, I believe it's their dashboard. And so there's, in the beginning, if you populate most of the important spreadsheets in each section, so out of that 55, they've broken it up. It's laid out well, it's just a lot of data. And so asking another consultant to work with that report, I'm not model is if some consultant would be willing to work with somebody else's model. So, but a question would be is, okay, are you willing to review it, or do you have, and to modify it, or do you have a model that you can bring to us? And it might not be bad for them to show us the model, because I'm pretty positive the model that Raftillis had is something that they'd used in the past. So if they would show us in the kickoff meeting or somewhere early on, then we can help drive that. The city, that the committee would be happy, I'm sure, to sort of say how to make it more manageable and make it help the city in the financial group, and not having to modify 55, well, they shouldn't have to modify 55 spreadsheets, but they have to modify a lot to get what it is. So that model is another one, and I'm not really sure the best way to do that, except for what I just stated, how you would reword that, but to state that, what, have them show us something or explain what we've got, what they would suggest. And then since it says cost of service, I would suggest that if everybody agrees to remove the cost of service, that we make sure we get rid of cost of service statements out of the proposal. So as for instance, in phase 6, the second line says cost of service. It says cost of service and rate design effort. So you take out cost of service. Phase 7 is reports, meetings, and presentations. Well, and so you have draft report, final report, and I think those are laid out pretty well. Did everybody have a chance to review those or see if they had any idea? The other one is that they have other supplemental services as identified, and I think that so that probably is a good idea to say, okay, what have they ran into and what in the past, and what might it cost? I think Raftillis had $25,000 extra or something as a contingency plan, if I remember. I think something around that nature. So that's the 7 phases, and then you have part 3, part 4, part 5, and part 6. And I believe those are sort of standard. Joe, did you get a chance to, those are sort of standard options that probably legally and other reasons you'd want it. So that's probably more of for the legal review, I would imagine.
Yeah, when I looked through the RFP, the phase 1 through 7, kind of the scope of services was what I wanted us to take a look at.
Okay.
And one thing to kind of think about too, if we wanted to kind of get the ball rolling on this, my predecessor and the outgoing public works director, they got together and they did a statement of qualifications for firms that were qualified for a number of different activities. That has benefited the city in a number of ways to get a proposal or a quote from individual firm that we have already pre-vetted through this process. So we don't have that currently set up for financial services. They're all engineering services related to public works and utilities. But that might be something that the committee would consider us pursuing as a way to get a list of qualifications, and then we can meet with one or more than one firm individually for the items that we want, instead of kind of putting out an RFP and then getting it back, and then we're kind of stuck in the process.
Okay, so what, if I'm understanding you correctly, that gives you more leeway to get what the city wants, instead of saying, okay, we forgot to put something in the RFP, now we're stuck with the RFP because that's what we put out for all the customers. Then I think that has a greater potential for success than the other does. Does the committee have thoughts? I think, I'm seeing a lot of nods that,
Okay.
that the committees, so we appreciate that thought process.
No, that'd be great. I mean, the training, there was a virtual training through the American Public Power Association that was done with the firm that, does training for APPA. So a firm like that or others could be vetted through a statement of qualifications, and then we could initiate conversations directly with them, and then just get a scope and fee and pursue the what we want in the items.
And then and also might see what's important in the rate structure for this go around and see if somebody's more qualified to help with a different aspect than not. So that could be, sounds good to me. So what I was suggesting was that, so I guess the bottom line is, can we agree on the cost of service removal, or does the city need to look at that more? I think I'm seeing nods in the head that the committee was in approval of removing that. Is that something the city would agree to, or do you need to go back and discuss that?
I think we could agree to it. If a motion can be entertained to pursue a statement of qualifications, we could get one ready to go and have out when our purchasing manager returns, and kind of get it out on the street 3 weeks for the holidays, and have qualifications back hopefully by the first week of January.
So that the qualifications would be there, we'd still have time to discuss the overall facts.
Absolutely.
Okay, if that's, So-
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
This item 6 we're discussing is for possible action, so we can take and vote on something.
yeah, thank you, yep. So I guess what I was looking at are, what I'm hearing you say is it's more important that we get, I'm gonna have to have somebody else help me with the motion anyway. Your request for a proposal out, not a request for a proposal, it's a request for, I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
The request for qualifications.
Qualifications, thank you.
Right.
Request for qualifications. So at this meeting, is that what you're looking for more than to look at what were the phases?
I wanted to get both.
Okay,
So
okay.
it would, I want to get started as soon as we can. So I want to get the committee's feedback on what worked, what didn't work. I don't want to go down a path and then have the committee be not satisfied with the way we're going. So, my thought is that let's get this on the front end. So, with the phases, it's been clear that, the cost of service is not what's been, desired. I'm suggesting we move forward with a statement of qualifications. That'll give us some latitude, and then we can, develop a relationship and work with an individual firm that will give us what we're looking for. And if it's not in the budget or wheelhouse, then we move on. So it gives us a little bit of freedom and should enhance our schedule. So, but yeah, I think what you've given me on the phases is ideal. And then we get the statement of qualifications out, and then I can bring that to the committee. I don't think it'll be ready by the next meeting, but it should be ready by the meeting in February.
Okay, so I guess what I'm looking at is, we're looking at probably two motions. One motion for a statement of qualification, and one motion for sort of just a quick statement on the phases, I guess. So does anybody want to put a motion together for this? Let's do the statement of qualification first.
Somebody else tackle that one. I'm not. The verbiage has got me.
I move, we recommend staff proceed with a statement of qualifications for financial services to do a rate study.
Do I get a second?
I'll second that.
Now, so I'm just gonna, so now we have, any comments, and Joe, is that worded the way that you need it?
Yeah, I think that's appropriate.
Okay, so that's I'm just thinking it came out good. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing anything. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Eddie.
Any other comments?
Nope.
Okay, then, we've got a first, we have a second, a motion and a second, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. It
I did.
passes. Huh? It passes unanimously. So did you get that down, Joe and Josh, the motion? Okay, thank you very much, Arlene, I greatly
Yes,
appreciate that.
thank you.
Yes.
So, I guess what I would do is I can put together a motion for the phases, so I guess, I would suggest let me just rephrase it and make sure we're okay, and then I'll put a motion together. So I suggest we do 6 phases. And then I guess, do you want a motion with the changes, or just, Josh, there's a lot to go through back from what I said earlier, but I don't want to make a really lengthy motion either. So, Joe, what are you looking for? I would minimally state that we have 6 with the removal of the cost of service, but we also need the rate design a little bit and the modification. So I'd be asking for the city to bring a draft back, is what I think the easiest way to do.
So would it help to, move forward with the phase recommendation, eliminating the cost of service, and then staff bring back a draft for review?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want me to add something about the rate structure and the rate design and the rate model, or not in the motion? Or do you have that covered already in my comments?
I think I've got that.
Okay, I'm just trying to make the motion easiest. Well, that makes it harder, so, but whatever you need, so let's go with the easy route. Okay, so I make a motion that the city prepare a draft with 6 new phases instead of 7, and by eliminating the cost of service analysis and modifying the rate design and rate model development phases. Does anybody
I
second?
can second that.
Okay. Any comments? Conversation?
Drink some water.
So does that cover what you need, Joe? Okay. And did you get that, Josh? Okay. Okay, so, everybody, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. It passes unanimously.
How much is in the budget for the rate study?
So for this fiscal year, we don't have anything in the budget for a rate study because we weren't planning on doing a rate study this fiscal year. So we're going to look at all of our professional services, technical services within the utility enterprise funds to see if we can, get one started and then kind of plan into budget for next year. So that's why I'd kind of prefer the scope and fee portion instead of saying, hey, we've got X amount of dollars and then it costs X amount of dollars.
Yeah. Thank
Okay, was there any other comments on this subject from the committee? Joe, did you have anything else? I think
No, I'm done.
I think it might be helpful to look at the proposal in the future, but right now, we don't want to spend the, what Raftils, because actually, there was some good stuff in Raftilis's proposal. It's just a matter of what, was presented. I mean, what the overall was presented out of the proposal is confusing for me. Okay, so I'm sorry, Joe, you said you didn't have anything else?
Nothing else on this
Okay,
item.
Sorry. Okay, so then I will close out item number 6, and we'll go to item number 7. So does anybody have some recommendations for future agenda items? Okay, not seeing anything, I will bring something up and see what people want to add or thought. So the one thing you brought up, Joe, was in the past was the landfill. You said there was a CIP project that you wanted to bring forward to suggest. Is that just something in the budget, or is that something you want as an agenda item?
So I think with the existing CIP, we'll be able to cover what's needed out there. We're working with the operator to make sure that what was there is not damaged again. So it's kind of looking at the area. There used to be a retaining wall that was there, and so we don't want to just put another wall back in and then have, it gets smashed again. So it looks like in normal operations that it's something that over time, fell out. So we're going to be have them do some repairs and make sure that area is better than it is, now. But I think with the existing CIP and the expansion, we'll be able to cover it. If not, it'll come into the next fiscal year's CIP.
Okay, so you'd have until May to sort of bring it back in. And
Yeah.
it was in the minutes, and I just
Yep.
wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to put it into the agenda if you wanted it.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, the problem that I saw when I'm a frequent user of that facility is the CMU, concrete masonry units, the block wall,
Right?
was not solid enough to endure the hits that are getting caused by it. And what happened was a citizen backed into the bollards and knocked the wall over because the bollards were stuck in the wall.
Okay.
So I recommend that front end where the 40-yard and 30-yard roll-offs are dumped into be poured with 5,000 PSI poured in place concrete
Yeah,
with sufficient rebar.
we're looking at that. I know there's rebar that's there that's sticking out. So we're also looking at the design of that operation. If there's going to be some kind of like stop or rubber stop that can withhold the force of those roll-offs. So it's something that we're looking at.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure if we didn't need a specific agenda item. So then we went through the presentation about what I was hoping to get across. And I think we did pretty good with the RFP, but there's still a lot more to go. Do we want to, or can we bring an agenda item for continuing rate discussion, and what does the committee want, and what would you like, Joe?
I think with the statement of qualifications, getting those out mid-December, and then having them come back, probably the first week of January, we'll need some time to review those and make sure. So I could bring, either that meeting, if with the meeting, if we can have the meeting the second week of January, then which I think would be ideal with the holidays. That second Wednesday, then I think I can bring back, here's what we've got, here's what, has been reviewed, and then bring that to the committee as a, way to move forward then with an RFP.
Okay, so, that's one thing, let's bring up that, so we're in the agenda items, I think we can bring that up as far as, so the city is proposing, I think it works in everybody's favor to have, I think it was the 11th, is that correct, January the 11th?
Yes.
So that would still be at 1 o'clock, is that,
Yes, on a Wednesday. Yeah, so the second Wednesday of January instead of the first, and then that would, to my knowledge, there's no meeting that's after that, so there's not another meeting at 5. So we don't have a limit.
okay,
So at 6.
I think I'm just gonna go down the line. Eileen, I think you said you had another commitment for that month as it was.
I'm gonna be in Australia.
Nice.
For the summer, huh?
Yeah, really. Marty, are you okay with the
I'm
12th?
good with that, yes.
I'm okay with the 12th.
I'm good.
And-
11th to the 12th.
I'm sorry.
11th.
11th, thank you.
Yeah.
Wednesday,
I'm okay with the 11th.
whatever, is that Wednesday, so I apologize for the confusion.
That's right.
Greg?
I'm okay with it.
Okay, so we'll hopefully Howard, but we got the majority that can meet. Looks like we have a quorum, and so I would suggest we go ahead and change it to the second Wednesday.
Are we gonna be short if I have surgeries, but they're not scheduled yet? Are we gonna have a quorum if I'm not here?
We'd have at least 4 of us.
All right.
So if Marty, myself,
that'll work.
Ned, and Greg can make it, then we'll have a quorum.
Yeah,
Should be good, should be good.
right now it's not scheduled, but who knows?
I understand. We,
Work around our schedule, not your schedule.
Okay.
right.
Sorry, Greg.
Your health is, well, I appreciate that, but yes, your health is prominent. Is that a proper way to say it? Okay, so then, I guess what we'll do then is the RFP, we'll just we can work on the language for the agenda related to the RFP.
Right.
The rate discussion, then maybe we just put off until February, because I think there's a lot of data there. I think it'd be beneficial to bring back some additional discussion, and maybe with the RFP, in February, we'd have a better idea.
Is there anything the committee needs to do, like, for the statement of qualifications, review it? Are we just gonna let Joe's team take care of it?
I think, Joe, that's something there, I don't think there's much we can
Okay.
do in that, so, but.
Good enough.
thank you. So the one big thing that seems to be a glaring, okay, let me say it wrong, but one of the big things that's being in the paper and everything is the SNWA, as far as the wastewater.
Right. So, they're prepared. Hopefully, we'll be able to give a presentation update on where we're at, so I can have an agenda item for them to come and present where we stand with the 2 options, the direct reuse, the indirect reuse options.
So if I can still understand, so if it would help the situation, so not go into a whole lot of detail, not discussion on it, but seems to be a big issue on costs, and what are the overall costs, what we have to pay up front, and what we have to pay in later years.
Correct.
And so my understanding is that are they gonna put a report together for the 2 options, or just say you need to pick one and then they'll do a formal report for the option that's picked?
I don't think they're going to do a report. I think they're going to do like a high-level presentation, and then that's going to be presented to the committee and then council, and then any questions that are asked at that point, and then there'll be staff direction from council.
Okay, so then they're asking to pick, so with a high-level presentation, they're gonna ask to pick the option, and then once the option is picked, then do we get a formal draft of a contract or something, I guess, would be?
I imagine it would be an interagency agreement.
Okay, because like I said, there seems to be a lot of issues about what we would owe, might owe, or, I think the money is a big issue here.
Sure.
And so if we can't see the fine print, I think it's a little hard to pick which option is really viable, or which is the most, I think people are sort of I'm hearing that people are thinking that one option's a lot cheaper than the other, and I'm not sure that it necessarily is. And so hopefully then Howard can be here, because he's got a lot of input, and that's where he's got a lot of expertise in that field, so he's spoken out. He's made several statements, and hopefully we can get his input on that. Okay, I think I didn't have anything else for the near future. Did anybody that bring up any other thoughts for? So if we did, so we'd have the standard minutes, and then you're gonna bring back the ongoing capital then. And I guess, so we would probably want to do that as, what is that, as, do you want SNA to be number 2, or do you want the city staff to be number 2? What do you need to
We'll have the SNWA be number 2.
Okay. So then we do the upgoing. Then I guess, is there anything else the city
would want to do after the update?
We'll do the ongoing CIP, we'll do a monthly update on water and power consumption.
Okay, because then we're looking at the RFP, right? So that would be, you're bringing back the information on the qualifications?
Yes.
So, and I think that's the major, so that can be put in wherever you feel is the easiest to have it.
Okay.
And then our normal for possible action regarding the agenda items. Now, did we drop one along the way to make room for something?
We postponed item 4 in this presentation.
Yeah, the ongoing capital.
Actually, number 3, yeah,
Yeah,
3.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay, I've been doing that all night. So yeah, so we're bringing that back. So we have 1, 2, 3, I think we have one less than this time, don't we? Joe, is that what I got? We got 6 items?
Yes,
For next-
that's what I got right now.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
I don't know where to put this, but we talked briefly about our, regarding our water and power consumption. Can we have something like that put into the Boulder City Review? In other words, touting that that citizens of Boulder City have reduced this amount of electricity and water because we're not getting anything out there. And I've had absolutely zero attendance at these meetings, whether it be online or whether it be in person. And then I found out one of the problems was we had the wrong time on the calendar notes. We were supposed to start at 3 p.m. So I called the clerk and told them about that, and they were supposed to have contacted you. So I think there's a little bit of cleanup we have to do in the sense of when we're going to have our meetings, like 1 p.m. instead of 3, which has been like that since last year. And then I feel that because of the actions of the committee and your reporting of what our consumptions are for water reduction and electrical reduction, I think it needs to go in the Boulder City Review.
yeah, if the city has a place to put that, the other thing to do is to really strengthen, maybe there's a better way to say that, the utility flyer. Get more information, really push the conservation. Did we get that much information out on the water ordinance in the utility flyer yet?
We did in the last one, that, you know, that the changes, the initial changes are being made and that everything is coming, you know, due January 1st.
Okay, I was trying to remember if I saw that or not, because that's the thing, because I've talked to a few people and most people don't even understand that January 1st is, there's no water on the sidewalks. So I agree with Greg. I think that's one thing we're hoping for is just, is there a way to get a little more of the information out to the public to do it? So maybe the website, the flyers, and if there's a place in the paper that the city can do something would be helpful.
Okay?
Thank you, Greg. That's a great point. Okay, so do we you want us to do a motion just to say that approve the next agenda, or do you want us to list it out? What do you want for it? What would you prefer for a motion?
Whatever works. I think I got the list, you know,
Okay.
from what was discussed.
Okay, so we're looking at I think what we said is 6 items?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess, does anybody have a motion?
Do we need a motion?
I think that, do we need a motion, or do you prefer one or not? Because it's for possible action. I was thinking you were preferring a motion. but-
Yeah, I think a motion, you know, on the committee on what's on the agenda is preferred.
So you're just saying that we approve the agenda for next, is that a good enough motion, that we
Yeah.
approve the agenda that's been discussed?
Yes.
For next time? Yeah.
I propose that we approve the agenda as discussed for the next meeting.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Any conservation, comments? So we do have some leeway, I believe, with the, that it can be modified if something comes up, so, with Greg's comment about the, not estimated, but proposed.
We're good.
So, anybody, yeah, we're good, unless I missed a comment. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
And that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Quick comment.
Okay.
What Greg was talking about with getting the information about January 1st, I agree. Nobody in my neighborhood. I mean, I understand we have things out there, but they don't seem to be known to a lot of people to go look. So could we, again, maybe use the Chambers sign at, the Albertsons at the Buchanan intersection, or could we also put up, I don't know, signs someplace, something, just to tell people, because we're talking about something that's gonna impact people's lives, could impact people's lives a little bit, just to make sure that they got the information and not turn around and say, well, hey, it was posted on the website, or it was on our minutes, that the place that people aren't visiting. Just something to get the information out there for everybody.
Well, we have a public information officer on staff in Boulder City. And I'm saying that we need to give her direction from the city saying, hey, we need to get this information out in multiple sources and avenues. And that's what I'm recommending.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So, I guess we have the public comment period. So we will close out item number 7 and go to the public comment period. So if anybody has any, comments relating to anything related to the utility department, do you want to call in? And Josh, we didn't have anything from earlier? Okay. So the number is 702-589-9629.
Sun's going down, does it every night. Sheet of paper. Don't forget your pink bottle.
Again, the number is 702-589-9629. Okay, hearing no comments and we didn't receive anything, then we will close out the meeting at 3:42. And again, thank you for everybody's patience and participation. And again, so we're looking at January the 12th, just to remind everybody. 11. January the 11th, second Wednesday in,